Sir, if I ask you to lend me a small amount of money, I swear I'll pay every dollar back. But if I don't have it tonight, my mother will die. It is Sabon. The words came out of Ava Johnson's mouth in a broken rush, her voice shaking so badly she barely recognized it as her own. She stood near the edge of the living room, careful not to step too far onto the marble floor, her posture rigid, hands clenched together in front of her uniform. Years of training had taught her how to be invisible. Tonight, invisibility was no longer an option. Richard Hale turned slowly from the fireplace. The room was quiet except for the low crackle of burning logs. Expensive, silence, thick, controlled, untouched by urgency. Ava felt it pressed down on her chest. "You want to borrow money," Richard said at last. His tone was calm, almost distant. "Yes, sir," Ava replied quickly. "Borrow, not beg. I'll sign anything. I'll work extra hours. I'll pay it all back." Before Richard could respond, sharp heels clicked against the floor from the hallway. "What is going on here?" The voice cut through the room like glass. Elaine Hale stepped in, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, her eyes already narrowed with suspicion. She took in the scene in seconds, her husband standing still, the maid frozen near the door and her lips tightened. "Why is she still here?" Elaine demanded. "Didn't her shift end an hour ago?" Ava swallowed. "Ma'am." Elaine raised a hand. "Don't speak. Do that." She turned to Richard. "You do realize how this looks, don't you? A young maid cornering you alone at night?" Ava felt her face burn. "That's not what I said. Don't speak," Elaine snapped, now fully facing her. "I've seen this before. Poor girl with a tragic story. Always the same script." And Richard frowned. "Elaine, that's enough. We want to know." "No, it isn't," she shot back. "You're being manipulated. Richard, she's lying to you." 18. "I'm not lying," Ava said, her voice breaking despite herself. "My mother is in the hospital. She needs surgery tonight. I can prove it. Please." And Elaine laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "Prove it? Of course you can. People like you always can." She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "You think we don't know how this works? Guilt, tears, gratitude, then more money, then silence." "I be so." Ava shook her head desperately. "I swear on my life, I'll repay everything. I'll work until I collapse if I have to. I'll be grateful for the rest of my life." "OD, that's exactly the problem," Elaine said. "Grateful people are dangerous. They cling." "Of Elaine," Richard warned. But she was already too close. Ava dropped to her knees without thinking, the sound of fabric against marble echoing in the room. "Please," she whispered, humiliation flooding her. "I'll owe you forever. I'll never forget this. I just need my mother to live." For a moment, even Richard looked stunned. Elaine did not. "Disgusting," she said. "Get up. This isn't some street corner. Our gran." She reached down suddenly, grabbing a fistful of Ava's hair. Ava gasped in pain. "Please, ma'am. Out," Elaine snarled, yanking hard. The world tilted. Ava's knees slipped on the smooth floor, and she was dragged several feet before losing her balance entirely. She cried out as her shoulders slammed into the edge of a table, her body collapsing onto the cold stone near the doorway. Richard moved instinctively. "Elaine, stop," but it was already done. Elaine released her, breathing hard. "Get out of my house," she said. "If I ever see you try this again, I'll have security deal with you." "I was go techie." Ava lay on the floor, stunned, pain radiating through her arm and hip. Slowly, she pushed herself up, ignoring the tears streaming down her face. She did not look at Elaine again. She couldn't. She looked at Richard. "I wasn't lying," she said quietly, "and I would have paid you back. Every dollar. It stung." Then she turned and limped out the door. The house fell into silence once more. Elaine exhaled sharply. "Honestly, these people..." "Everyone's saying..." Richard didn't respond. Something about the way Ava had looked at him, no anger, no accusation, just exhaustion refused to leave his mind. You shouldn't encourage that behavior, Elaine continued. It's dangerous. I create too. Richard set his glass down. Untouched. You hurt her. She deserved it. When 45, he turned to her slowly. Did she? Elaine scoffed. Don't tell me you believe her. It was working 10-10. I don't know, he said. And that's the point. Ivan, Elaine stared at him. Incredulous. You're choosing her story over mine. I'm choosing the truth. Richard replied evenly. Elaine's eyes hardened. Then find it. But don't say I didn't warn you. Tuark. She turned and walked away, heels clicking back down the hallway. Richard remained where he was for a long moment. Staring at the closed door Ava had disappeared through, he replayed her words again and again. Not the plea, but the certainty. I will pay it back. He picked up his phone and made a call. Within minutes, he had the name of the hospital. St. Mary's. He looked down at his immaculate hands. Then at the smear of blood he suddenly noticed on the marble floor near the door. For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt something shift inside him, not guilt, not pity, but responsibility. And this time, he did not walk away. If Ava's story moved you, please like this video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because someone near you might be watching this story too. Ava did not remember how she got down the driveway. She remembered the cold more than anything else, the way it bit through her thin uniform as she stumbled past the iron gates. The way the night air burned her lungs when she tried to breathe too deeply. Every step sent a sharp jolt of pain through her shoulder where she had hit the table, down her side where she had landed hard against the marble floor. But pain was familiar. She could walk through pain. What frightened her was the emptiness. The house behind her stood silent and luminous, all glass and light and certainty. It did not look like a place where someone had just been dragged by the hair and thrown out. It never did. That was the cruelest part. Violence that left no visible mark on the walls always belonged to the one who fell, not the one who pushed. She reached the bus stop at the corner and sat down heavily, pressing her arm to her chest. Her fingers came away damp. Blood. Not much, but enough to make her stomach tighten. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe slowly, counting the seconds the way the nurse at St. Mary's had taught her mother to do during coughing fits. In, hold, out. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. For one brief, foolish second, she thought it might be him. That Richard Hale had followed her out. That he had stopped her. That he had said this was all a terrible mistake. It was the hospital. Ms. Johnson, the nurse said, her voice polite and distant. We need to confirm whether you'll be able to make the deposit tonight. Ava swallowed. I'm trying, she said. Please, just give me a little more time. And there was a pause. Papers rustling. A keyboard tapping. We can hold the operating room until midnight, the nurse replied. After that, we'll have to reassess. Oh, midnight. Ava looked up at the dark sky, at the stars barely visible through the city's glow. Midnight was not a lot of time. It was barely anything at all. I understand, she said. Thank you. Right. She ended the call and pressed the phone against her forehead. Her hands were shaking now. No matter how hard she tried to stop them, she thought of her mother's face earlier that evening. Pale but still trying to smile. Still apologizing for being a burden. Don't bow for anyone. Baby, her mother had whispered. Promise me. Ava let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She had broken that promise tonight in more ways than one. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes. She climbed on, ignoring the curious glance from the driver when he noticed her limp and the tear in her sleeve. She took a seat near the back, away from everyone else, and stared out the window as the city slid past. She had always known her place. That knowledge had been drilled into her early by teachers who expected less, by managers who spoke slowly to her as if intelligence were contagious, by customers who looked through her instead of at her. At the Hale residence, knowing her place had been an unspoken rule. Don't linger. Don't ask questions. Don't exist beyond the work you do. Tonight, She had broken that rule too. Her shoulder throbbed in time with the passing streetlights. She wondered if she should go to the emergency room herself. But the thought felt almost obscene. She could still walk. She could still breathe. That was more than her mother could say. When the bus dropped her near her apartment, Ava moved carefully up the narrow steps, gripping the railing with her good hand. The hallway smelled of fried food and cleaning solution. Normal smells. Familiar smells. She unlocked her door and stepped inside the small, dim space she shared with her mother. The apartment felt wrong without her. Ava sank onto the couch and finally let herself cry, not loudly, not dramatically, but in silent, shaking breaths that left her dizzy. She pressed her face into the worn fabric cushion, willing herself to be stronger, to think clearly. She needed money. Fast. She thought of coworkers, distant relatives. The small savings account she already knew was empty. She thought of payday loans and the kind of interest that trapped people for decades. She thought of selling her phone, her laptop, the few pieces of jewelry her mother had insisted on giving her over the years. None of it would be enough. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. Saint, Mary's hospital has confirmed your mother's condition. I'm on my way. Ava stared at the screen, her heart slamming so hard she felt dizzy. Richard Hale. Her first instinct was disbelief. Her second was fear. She imagined Elaine's face, twisted with anger. She imagined this was some cruel extension of the humiliation, a way to confirm that Ava had lied, to prove her desperation false. Her hands hovered over the screen. She typed, erased. Typed again. You don't have to come. I understand if you changed your mind. The reply came almost immediately. I haven't. Ava sat back, stunned. She did not know what that meant. She did not know what it would cost her. All she knew was that something had shifted, and she had no control over it anymore. Across town, Richard Hale drove through streets he rarely noticed. He had lived in this city for decades, yet entire neighborhoods felt unfamiliar now. Rows of modest buildings, flickering streetlights, people waiting at bus stops with their shoulders hunched against the cold. He caught sight of a laundromat on the corner, its windows fogged with steam, and something twisted uncomfortably in his chest. He thought of Elaine's words. These people. The phrase unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. At St. Mary's, the fluorescent lights were harsh and unflattering. Richard gave his name at the desk and watched the receptionist's expression shift from indifference to recognition, to something like practiced politeness. This way, Mr. Hale, she said. Ava saw him before he saw her. He looked out of place in the waiting room, tall and composed in a tailored coat, hands folded neatly in front of him. People glanced at him, then looked away, instinctively aware of the imbalance he carried with him like a shadow. He noticed Ava's injury immediately. What happened to your arm? He asked quietly as he approached. She stiffened. It's nothing. Whatever. He looked at the bruise darkening beneath the tear in her sleeve. That didn't come from nothing. Too mated. She hesitated, then shook her head. Please, don't. Izzy, he nodded once, respecting the boundary. How is your mother? They're waiting, Ava said. Until midnight. This day, Richard checked his watch. There was still time. He spoke with the admissions staff, his tone calm but firm, asking questions, requesting documents, confirming details. Ava watched from her chair, her emotions a tangled mess of hope, shame, and fear. Every polite sentence felt like a miracle and an accusation at the same time. When he returned, he met her eyes. I verified everything, he said. Your mother's condition, the surgery, the cost, with C2. Ava's throat tightened. And you weren't lying. I fanned. The words hit her harder than any insult Elaine had thrown at her. She nodded, unable to speak. Richard took a breath. I need you to understand something, he said. What happened tonight was wrong. And Ava looked down at her hands. I shouldn't have stayed after my shift. That's not what I meant. Well. She looked up then, surprised. I'm going to cover the deposit, he continued. Tonight, we'll discuss the rest later. eyes. Her breath caught. "Sir, this is not charity," he said, echoing her earlier words. "It's a loan. On your terms." Eyes. Tears spilled over despite her best efforts. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back. I promise. Every dollar. I believe you," he said simply. For the first time since she had fallen to her knees on that marble floor, Ava felt something loosen inside her chest. Not relief. Not yet. But possibility. Somewhere down the hall. A nurse called her name. Midnight was still approaching. But for the first time that night, Ava was not facing it alone. The waiting room clock clicked over with an unforgiving sound, each second announcing itself as if it mattered more than the last. Ava sat rigid in the hard plastic chair, her injured shoulder burning dully beneath her sleeve, her eyes fixed on the swinging doors that led to the operating wing. Every time they opened, her breath caught. Every time they closed again, disappointment settled deeper into her chest. Richard sat a few seats away, posture straight, hands folded loosely, his expression unreadable. He had made the calls, signed the paperwork, spoken to administrators in low, efficient tones. The deposit had been accepted, the surgery approved. On paper, everything was moving forward. On paper, "You can sit closer if you want," Ava said quietly after several minutes. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. She had not meant to offer comfort. She barely had any left for herself. Richard looked at her, then shifted one seat closer without comment. "They said she'll be under anesthesia for at least 3 hours." Ava continued, her voice thin. "Sometimes longer. It depends on how much damage there is." "Tenchery, how long has she been sick?" he asked. Ava hesitated. This was not a question she usually answered honestly. "Longer than she admitted," she said. She kept saying it was just a cough, that it would pass. And you believed her?" "I wanted to go," Ava replied. Believing her was easier than forcing her to stop working. Richard nodded slowly. He understood that calculus, the choice between truth and survival. He had made versions of it himself, just dressed in better suits. Across the room, a man paced back and forth, his shoes squeaking faintly against the floor. A woman whispered urgently into her phone, her voice breaking as she repeated the same reassurances. The waiting room was full of quiet negotiations with fate, all of them unseen, unrecorded. "This place never sleeps," Ava said, almost to herself. "But it never really rests either." "Is afraid." Richard followed her gaze. "Hospitals are honest," he said. "They don't pretend life is fair." Ava gave a small, humorless smile. "Neither do poor people." "Michael." He glanced at her then, surprised by the bluntness. She met his eyes steadily. No apology in her expression this time. She had nothing left to protect. Minutes passed. Then more. At 11:47 p.m., a nurse approached them, holding a clipboard. Ava stood so quickly her vision swam. "Ms. Johnson?" the nurse asked gently. "Yes." "Dzeng. They've taken your mother into surgery," she said. "You can't see her right now, but the doctor will update you as soon as there's progress." Ava nodded, gripping the edge of the chair until her knuckles turned white. "Thank you." As the nurse walked away, the reality settled in. There was nothing left to do now. No more pleading. No more bargaining. Just waiting. Richard checked his watch again, then looked at Ava. "Have you eaten?" She blinked. "I don't think so." End quote. "Today." "Then today." She shook her head. He stood. "I'll get you something." Resand. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I want to go." He returned a few minutes later with a paper cup of coffee and a wrapped sandwich from the vending area. Ava stared at it as if it were something foreign. "I might get sick," she warned. "That's all right," he said. "Eat anyway." Inisoded. She managed a few bites before her stomach rebelled. But even that small effort made her feel more anchored to her body, to the room, to the moment. "Thank you," she said again, more quietly. Richard nodded, then hesitated. About earlier, he began. Ava stiffened immediately. You don't need to explain. I wasn't going to two-way, he said. I was going to apologize. Oh, she looked up sharply. For not stopping it sooner, he continued. For letting someone speak to you that way. For what happened to you? Ava's throat tightened. She's your wife. Aid. That doesn't make it acceptable. Is these not to do and paste in this? The words hung between them, heavier than any promise. Ava looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor she could not control. She thought I was trying to trap you, Ava said after a moment. People always think that if someone like me gets close to someone like you, it has to be for a reason. Is artist, and was it? Richard asked gently. Ava met his gaze again. Yes, she said. The reason was that my mother is dying. End quote. He did not look away. They sat in silence after that, the kind that no longer felt hostile. The clock crept closer to midnight, then past it, unnoticed. Time lost its sharp edges and became something softer, heavier. At 1:12 a.m., the doors opened again. A man in scrubs stepped into the waiting room, his expression tired but focused. Ava was on her feet before he could say a word. I'm Dr. Lawson, he said. Are you Ms. Johnson? Yes, she breathed. Is she? She's still in surgery, he said. It's complicated. There's more damage than we initially thought. Ava's heart sank. But she's alive? Yes, he said firmly. She's fighting, but I need to be honest with you. Recovery will be long. She won't be able to return to her previous work. Ava nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Work could be replaced. Her mother could not. Will she wake up? Ava asked. Dr. Lawson paused. I believe she will, he said. But it may take some time. If we have do that. Richard stepped forward. What does she need? The doctor glanced at him, recognizing the name from the paperwork. A safe environment, no chemical exposure, follow-up treatment, and rest. iOS. Richard nodded. She'll have it. We have to stay 9. Ava turned to him, startled. Sir, we'll talk later, he said quietly. Focus on her. 90 yes. Doctor. Lawson gave a brief nod and returned through the doors. Ava sat back down, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Richard sat beside her again, closer this time. She did not move away. I don't know what happens after tonight, Ava said softly. I don't know how I'm supposed to fix all of this. Richard looked straight ahead. You don't have to fix everything tonight. If you do, she laughed weakly. That's easy for you to say. Which is not quartered. He turned to her. You're right, he said. It is, but it's also true. As Ava closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her in waves, somewhere beyond the doors. Machines beeped steadily, keeping time for a life she loved more than her own. For the first time since she had been dragged across that marble floor, Ava allowed herself to lean back, just a little, trusting that if she fell asleep, someone else would stay awake. Ava woke to the sound of soft footsteps and the low murmur of voices. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled her nose, and a dull ache pulsed through her shoulder. Then memory rushed back all at once, the marble floor, Elaine's hand in her hair, the hospital lights, the waiting room. She straightened abruptly, panic flaring. My mother, she's stable, Richard said quietly. He was standing a few feet away, speaking with Dr. Lawson near the nurse's station. When Ava spoke, both men turned toward her. Richard walked back and took the seat beside her, keeping his voice low. She's still sedated, he continued, but the surgery is over. The doctor says the next 12 hours are critical. But she made it through the night. 18 Vermender. Ava pressed her hand to her mouth. The relief hit her so suddenly her eyes burned. She nodded, afraid that if she tried to speak, she would break apart completely. Dr. Lawson approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. Ms. Johnson, he said gently. You can see her for a few minutes. She won't be awake yet. But hearing familiar voices can help. We have to bend this comment. Ava stood, her legs unsteady. Richard rose as well, instinctively reaching out when she swayed. His hand hovered near her elbow, then stopped, giving her space. "I'll wait here," he said. She nodded gratefully and followed the doctor down the corridor. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors. Ava's mother lay still beneath thin blankets, tubes and wires surrounding her in quiet efficiency. Her face looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way Ava had never allowed herself to see before. Ava moved to the bedside and took her mother's hand carefully. "I'm here," she whispered. "You did it. You're still here." Was no Johning. Her mother didn't respond, but Ava felt the warmth of her skin, the faint pressure of life still present beneath the machines. Tears slid silently down Ava's cheeks as she leaned closer. "I'm sorry I didn't make you stop working sooner," she murmured. "I'm sorry I let you carry everything alone." She stayed like that for several minutes, speaking softly, recounting small memories, burnt toast on Sunday mornings, laughter over old movies, the way her mother used to hum while folding laundry, ordinary things, human things. When the nurse signaled that time was up, Ava squeezed her mother's hand one last time and stepped back. "I'll be right outside," she promised. The waiting room felt different when she returned. Less hostile, less sharp. Richard was speaking on his phone, his tone controlled but intent. "Yes," he said. "I want a full report. Dates, vendors, safety records, everything. Is she?" He ended the call and turned to Ava. "How is she?" "She's still here," Ava said. "That's enough for now." "It is tenning, friend," he nodded. "Dr. Lawson said she'll be moved to recovery shortly. You can sit with her later today." End quote. Ava hesitated, then gestured toward her arm. "I should probably clean this up." "Everyone," Richard frowned. "You're injured." "Way, it's not serious." That's what people always say when it is no. Is it better to myself?" He guided her gently toward the triage area. Ava didn't argue this time. The adrenaline was gone, and the pain had sharpened into something undeniable. As the nurse cleaned the scrape on her shoulder and wrapped it carefully, Ava stared at the wall, embarrassment creeping in. "You didn't deserve that," Richard said suddenly. She glanced at him. "I know." Yet, he seemed surprised by her certainty. "I've spent my whole life being told what I deserve." Ava continued quietly. "Eventually, you learn the difference between what people say and what's true." Was not to him. The nurse finished and stepped away. Richard watched Ava flex her arm experimentally. "I spoke to my driver," he said. "He's outside. I can take you home. Or wherever you need to go." Ava shook her head. "I'm staying." End quote. "With your mother?" "Yes." "I come dine." He nodded. "Then I'll stay too." "Comes to visidios." She looked at him sharply. "You don't have to." I know," he said. "But I'm not leaving." They returned to the waiting area as dawn crept through the narrow windows, washing the room in pale light. The city outside was waking up, unaware of the small war that had been fought overnight. After a long silence, Ava spoke again. "Why are you doing this?" Richard didn't answer immediately. He watched a janitor mop the floor, the slow, methodical movements grounding in their simplicity. "Because last night," he said finally, "I realized how easy it is to mistake distance for innocence." "Well," she studied him, "your wife doesn't see it that way." End quote. "No," he agreed. "She doesn't. Ava lowered her gaze. "She thinks I was trying to trap you." Richard let out a slow breath. "Elaine believes that everyone is always trying to take something. We have this planned." "And you?" Ava asked. He met her eyes. "I think some people are just trying to survive." "It is S." They sat quietly after that. Nurses came and went. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. Time stretched and contracted in strange ways. Later that morning, Dr. Lawson returned with an update. "She's responding well," he said. There's a long road ahead, but the immediate danger has passed. Iward, Ava exhaled shakily. Thank you. There's working bald and with tension. As the doctor walked away, Richard stood. I need to make a few more calls, he said. About her care. And about other things. Ava nodded. I understand. Before he turned away, she spoke again. Mr. Hale. He paused. I meant what I said, she told him. About paying you back. Every dollar. It is just a daper. He regarded her for a moment, then nodded once. I believe you. Oh, cannerers. He walked toward the exit, phone already in hand. Ava watched him go, unsure what the future held, but certain of one thing: whatever came next would not be simple, and it would not be quiet. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt that the truth, at least, was finally on her side. By late morning, the hospital had settled into a steady rhythm. Machines hummed softly. Carts rolled past with quiet urgency. Somewhere down the corridor, a television murmured a morning news program no one seemed to be watching. Ava sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, counting each rise and fall of her chest as if it were something fragile that might disappear if she stopped paying attention. Her mother had not woken yet, but her color was better, less gray, less distant. Ava leaned forward and whispered, "You scared me," then smiled faintly at the irony. Her mother had always been the strong one, the one who worked through pain, through exhaustion, through indignity. Seeing her like this felt like looking at the world upside down. A knock sounded softly at the door. Richard stood in the doorway, jacket draped neatly over his arm, his expression composed but alert. He looked different in the daylight, less imposing, more human. The faint lines around his eyes visible now. They moved her to recovery, he said quietly. That's a good sign. 82, Ava nodded. Thank you. For everything. Well, he stepped inside but stayed near the door, careful not to intrude. I spoke with the hospital's financial office, he continued. Your mother's immediate care is covered. The rest will take it one step at a time. Withers Paka. Ava tightened her grip on her mother's hand. I don't want special treatment. No. Richard met her gaze. You're not getting it. You're getting adequate treatment. There's a difference. In better. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Someone from my office will contact you later today, he added, just to document the loan properly. It's, of course, Ava said. I'll sign whatever you need. We do, he hesitated. There's something else. End quote. Her shoulders tensed. What is it? I've asked for an internal review, Richard said, regarding the laundry facility where your mother worked. Vendors. Safety. Compliance. Exposure records. Ava stared at him. Why? Because if her illness is connected to negligence, he said evenly, someone needs to be held accountable. Her throat tightened. People like us don't get accountability. 8. People like you should, he replied. The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than doubt would have. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated on the small table beside the bed. A message lit up the screen. Unknown number. She opened it and felt the blood drain from her face. You humiliated yourself and my family. Don't mistake silence for forgiveness. This isn't over. Elaine. Ava closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. Richard noticed immediately. What happened? She hesitated, then handed him the phone. He read the message once, then again. His jaw tightened. She shouldn't be contacting you, he said. Ava gave a tired smile. I'm used to worse. That doesn't make it acceptable. What? It makes it survivable, she corrected gently. Richard exhaled slowly. I'll handle it. With most identical dog time, Ava shook her head. Please don't make this harder. 2 eyes. He looked at her sharply. Harder for who? For you, she said. For me. For my mother. I don't want trouble. I just want her to live. With factitude, Richard considered that, then nodded once. All right. But understand something. Silence isn't neutrality. Not anymore. Yes. He glanced toward the bed. I'll come back later. You should try to rest. I will, Ava said, though she wasn't sure how. When he left, Ava sank back into the chair, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. She thought of the night before, of Elaine's hands in her hair, of the marble floor rushing up to meet her. She touched the bandage on her shoulder unconsciously. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from a number she recognized. Ava, the nurse said softly. Your mother is waking up. Eddie. Ava was on her feet instantly. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Her lips parted slightly as she tried to speak. Hey, Ava whispered, leaning close. I'm here. Which commented. Her mother frowned faintly. Why? Why are you crying? Ava laughed softly through her tears. Because you're stubborn. Aided by dime. Her mother smiled weakly. That's my girl. Ava pressed her forehead gently against her mother's hand. You're going to get better, she said. But you're not going back to that place. Ever. Where? Her mother's brow furrowed. The money. Don't. Ava said quickly. Just rest. Indienne, crazing body down. Later that afternoon, Ava stepped out into the hallway to breathe. The weight of the last 24 hours pressed down on her chest. But beneath it, something else stirred. Resolve. Richard was standing near the window at the end of the hall, speaking quietly into his phone. No, he said. I want full transparency. If there's liability, we face it. If there's wrongdoing, we fix it. Is signed. He ended the call and turned as Ava approached. She's awake, Ava said. His expression softened. I'm glad. Oh, she remembers nothing. Ava added. About last night. Well, that's probably for the best. 2C2. Ava hesitated. Mr. Hale. Richard. I'd problem. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Yes? Oh, I need you to understand something, she said. I didn't ask you because you're rich. I asked you because you were the last door left. Defined to be. He nodded slowly. I know. End quote. And if this causes problems for you at home, at work, it already has, he said calmly. She looked at him, startled. And I'm still here, he continued. That should tell you something. Ava studied his face, searching for signs of regret. She found none. Outside the window, the city moved on, unaware of the small shifts happening inside this narrow corridor, shifts that would ripple outward in ways neither of them could yet see. Ava squared her shoulders. Then I'll do my part. Which is, survive, she said, and pay you back, with interest, if you insist. Is not. A corner of his mouth lifted. We'll discuss terms later. Again, for the first time since she had walked into that grand living room and spoken the words that changed everything, Ava allowed herself a small, cautious hope. Not that justice would be loud, but that it might finally be real. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm linen, a strange combination that Ava was beginning to associate with relief and fear at the same time. Her mother slept again, the rise and fall of her chest slow but steady, a rhythm Ava had memorized over the past few hours. Each breath felt like a small victory. Ava sat beside the bed, her back straight despite the ache in her shoulder, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked composed now, but inside her thoughts were restless, circling the same questions over and over. What would happen next? How long could this fragile calm last? A soft knock sounded at the door. Ava turned as Richard stepped inside, this time without his coat. His tie was loosened. The crisp edge of formality softened just enough to suggest fatigue. He paused when he saw Ava's mother sleeping, then lowered his voice instinctively. I spoke with the attending physician, he said. They're optimistic, cautiously, but genuinely. Ava nodded. That's more than I was hoping for yesterday. Gay, as Nana before pated. Yesterday feels like a long time ago, he replied. It did. Less than 24 hours had passed since she had stood trembling in his living room, her dignity stripped away piece by piece. Yet the distance between that moment and this one felt enormous, as if something fundamental had shifted in the space between. Richard moved closer. Stopping at the foot of the bed, he studied Ava's mother for a moment. His expression unreadable. She worked hard, Ava said quietly, following his gaze. Always did, even when she shouldn't have. Is fearant, Richard nodded. People like that rarely think they're allowed to stop. Is the dynas in naste? Ava glanced at him. People like that? People who believe rest is something you earn after everything else is done. He clarified. And everything else is never done. Does not have I vord den. She considered his words, then gave a small, sad smile. That sounds familiar. It's sad. They stood in silence for a moment, the machines filling the gaps where conversation might have gone. There's something you should know, Richard said finally. About what happens next. Reported. Ava's stomach tightened. Okay. With free night. I won't pressure you, he continued. But I won't pretend this will be simple either. My wife is not pleased. Ava looked down at her hands. I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. It is not. Richard's jaw tightened slightly. You didn't cause them. We can. That's not how she sees it. No. He agreed. It isn't. I won. He took a breath, as if choosing his words carefully. Elaine believes control is the same as order. When something disrupts that, she reacts. Ava thought of the sudden pain, the shock of being pulled backward, the cold floor against her skin. Violently, she said before she could stop herself. Richard met her eyes. He didn't look away. Yes. Ava swallowed. Then why are you still helping me? He answered without hesitation. Because being silent would make me complicit. I bring. The words settled heavily between them. Ava turned back to her mother, watching the slow blink of the monitor. I don't want pity, she said. And I don't want protection. I just want fairness. Richard nodded. That's usually the most dangerous thing to ask for. End quote. She huffed a quiet, humorless laugh. So I've been told. There Bovert. A nurse appeared briefly to adjust a line, murmuring reassurances before moving on. When the door closed again, Ava shifted in her chair, wincing slightly. You should sit back, Richard said. You've barely rested. End quote. I'm fine. Mister, you're injured. So is my pride, she replied softly. One of them will heal. As way. He watched her for a moment, then pulled a chair closer and sat. You don't have to carry everything alone, he said. Ava turned toward him. You know what's strange? I've heard people say that my entire life, usually right before they leave. Well, I'm not saying it lightly. I know, she said. That's what scares me. Will do. He studied her face, seeing not weakness but caution earned the hard way. Trust doesn't have to be immediate, he said. It can be gradual, conditional. She nodded slowly. Like a loan. Oper. A faint smile crossed his face. Exactly. I won. Her phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. She checked the screen and felt a familiar knot form in her chest. Another message from Elaine. You think one night makes you untouchable? It doesn't. Remember where you belong. Ava closed her eyes briefly, then slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Richard noticed the shift in her expression. More messages? Yes. Do you want me to intervene? Ava shook her head. Not yet. It sighed. Why not? Because I don't want to be rescued, she said simply. I want this to be right. Too. He leaned back, considering her words. Sometimes doing what's right looks a lot like rescuing, he said. The difference is consent. Ez's. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Then if I ask, she said carefully. Will you still help? Yes, he replied. If you ask. Ardor. She nodded, absorbing that. Later that afternoon, a social worker stopped by to discuss discharge planning, outlining medications, follow-up appointments, lifestyle changes. Ava listened intently, asking questions, taking notes. Richard stood nearby, silent but attentive, occasionally stepping in to clarify details or confirm arrangements. When the social worker left, Ava exhaled slowly. "It's a lot." "Oh, it is," Richard agreed. "But it's manageable." "Why?" She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and something else, resolve. "I'll need to find different work," she said. "Something safer, something stable." "It is. I may have an idea," he replied. Ava stiffened. "I don't want charity." "Tuwei, it's not charity," he said calmly. "It's an opportunity. If you decide it makes sense. If not, you walk away." It was Duddy. She considered that. "We'll talk later." "DZ, free too." "That's fair." As evening approached, the light in the room softened. Ava's mother stirred again, her eyes fluttering open. "Ava?" she murmured weakly. "I'm here," Ava said instantly, leaning forward. "You're okay. You're safe." Her mother's gaze drifted, then settled briefly on Richard. Confusion crossed her face. "Who?" "A friend," Ava said after a heartbeat. "Someone who helped." Her mother nodded faintly, already slipping back into sleep. Richard stepped back, giving them privacy. Ava watched her mother's face relax, then straightened slowly. "She's going to ask questions," Ava said quietly. "So will you," Richard replied. "Yes," she agreed. "I will." They walked out into the hallway together. The hospital buzzed with the low hum of evening activity. Lives intersecting and diverging in quiet, constant motion. "I don't know what this makes us," Ava said as they stopped near the elevators. "It doesn't have to make us anything yet," Richard replied. "Sometimes it's enough to keep going." 10, she nodded. "Then that's what I'll do." Where the reason tome. As they parted ways for the night, Ava felt the weight of exhaustion settle over her, but beneath it, something steadier had taken root. She had been hurt, humiliated, dismissed, but she was still standing. And somewhere between a marble floor and a hospital bed, the truth had begun to surface. Slow and undeniable, morning light filtered through the hospital windows in thin, pale bands, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. Ava watched them move as she sat beside her mother's bed, counting time not by hours but by breaths. Each inhale still sounded fragile to her, as if the air itself might refuse to cooperate. Her mother slept more deeply now, sedated but stable. The machines no longer felt like threats. They were companions, watchful, steady, indifferent in the way only machines could be. Ava shifted carefully in her chair, her shoulder protesting with a sharp reminder of the night before. She ignored it. Pain had a way of shrinking when compared to fear, and fear had loosened its grip just enough to let something else take its place. Resolve. The door opened softly, and a nurse stepped in with a clipboard. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson," she said. "Your mother's vitals look good. We're going to start reducing the sedation this afternoon." "Oh, go." Ava nodded. "Thank you." "I am." As the nurse left, Ava allowed herself a small breath of relief. It wasn't victory. It wasn't safety. But it was forward motion. Her phone vibrated quietly on the small table beside the bed. This time, it wasn't Elaine. It was a message from an unfamiliar number, followed almost immediately by another. "This is Martin Lewis, legal counsel for Hale Industries. Mr. Hale has asked me to coordinate with you regarding documentation for the medical loan and related matters." Ava stared at the screen for a long moment. Related matters. The phrase carried weight. It suggested this was no longer just about money or a single night of desperation. It meant systems, processes, consequences. It meant being seen. She typed back slowly. "I'm at the hospital with my mother. I can speak later today." The response came quickly. "Of course. There's no rush. Please focus on your family." Ava exhaled, surprised by the courtesy. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned her attention back to her mother. A few hours later, as the sun climbed higher, Richard arrived. He didn't announce himself this time. Ava sensed him before she saw him. The quiet shift in the room's energy. He stood near the door, hands in his pockets, scanning the monitors with practiced calm. "How is she?" he asked. "They're going to wake her up slowly," Ava replied. "She should be more alert by tonight." "Well, that's good," he said. He hesitated, then added, "How are you?" She gave a short laugh. "I don't know yet. I work out." He nodded. "Fair." Dudded. They stepped out into the hallway together, the door closing softly behind them. The corridor smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, the hospital's version of normalcy. "I spoke to my attorney," Richard said as they walked. "Not to protect myself, to make sure everything we do is clean. Transparent." 18 said. Ava stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think there are strings you can't see," he replied. "Or traps you didn't agree to, well." Her gaze searched his face. "People like me learn to look for those first. Number 10s. I know. It is, doesn't it?" They resumed walking. Slower now. "I also spoke with Human Resources," he continued, "about your position at the house." They was Pat de Zelfast. Ava's stomach tightened. "Am I being fired?" "No," he said immediately. "But I want to be honest. Things there won't be the same." One. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I didn't expect them to be. It's not of though. Elaine is resistant," Richard said carefully, "to any situation she doesn't control." Ava thought of the message. The threat wrapped in polite cruelty. "She doesn't see me as a situation," Ava said quietly. "She sees me as a problem." "I do's." Richard didn't deny it. "That's why I think it may be better for you not to return." "Oh, day." Ava stopped again. "I need that job." "Is there work at 9? You need safety more," he replied. "And dignity." She crossed her arms, wincing slightly as her shoulder protested. "I don't want to be moved out of the way because I make someone uncomfortable." "Derry Duix. That's not what this is." "Eza, isn't it?" Richard met her gaze steadily. "This is about removing you from harm, not from sight." Two-way. They stood there for a moment, the hallway buzzing quietly around them. "I have an opening at one of our smaller offices," he said. "Administrative support, predictable hours, clean environment. It's not a favor. You're qualified." With her wasnar, Ava absorbed that slowly. "And my mother? She'll need care," he said. "Follow-ups. A stable schedule. This would allow that." "Permabit." Ava looked away, wrestling with the familiar fear that acceptance would erase her independence, that taking help would somehow make her smaller. "You don't have to decide now," Richard added. "Nothing happens without your consent." "Represent," she nodded. "Thank you for saying that." "I do." They returned to the room just as Ava's mother stirred, her eyelids fluttering open with more focus this time. "Ava?" she murmured. "I'm here," Ava said instantly, moving to her side. "You're doing great." "Was odd example at duty," her mother blinked, then frowned slightly as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "What happened?" "You got sick," Ava said gently. "They fixed what they could. Now you need to rest." And her mother's gaze shifted to Richard, who stood a respectful distance away. "Who's that?" Ava hesitated, then said, "Someone who helped us." Her mother studied him for a moment, then nodded faintly. "Thank you," she said, her voice weak but sincere. "You're welcome," Richard replied quietly. As the day wore on, Ava watched her mother grow more alert, asking questions, complaining softly about the machines, about the dryness in her throat. Normal complaints, beautiful complaints. Late in the afternoon, Richard received a call. He stepped into the hallway, his expression tightening as he listened. When he returned, Ava noticed immediately. "What is it?" "My wife," he said. "She's not happy with the direction things are taking." "Oh, Bertie." Ava's shoulders tensed. "I don't want to be the reason." "You're not," he interrupted gently. "You're the reason I'm finally paying attention." "Oh," as dudded. She studied him, seeing the cost in his eyes. "This could get ugly." "Oh, it already is," he said. "The difference is that now it's honest." I pried. Ava leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling into her bones. I didn't plan any of this, she said. I know, Richard replied. But plans aren't the same as responsibility. As evening approached, the hospital lights softened again, shifting into night mode. Ava sat quietly, holding her mother's hand, feeling the warmth. The life still there. Whatever came next, lawyers, accusations, choices could wait a few more hours. For now, her mother was alive, and Ava was no longer invisible. That night, Ava did not leave the hospital. She lay curled on the narrow visitor's couch beside her mother's bed, shoes still on, jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. The lights were dimmed, the hallway quieter now. But the building never truly slept. Somewhere nearby, a machine beeped steadily, counting out time in a language Ava was beginning to understand too well. Her mother stirred occasionally, murmuring half-formed words before drifting back into sleep. Each sound made Ava's heart jump, then settle again. She had learned this rhythm: fear, relief, repeat. At some point past midnight, Ava's phone buzzed softly in her hand. A new message. She stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it, bracing herself. This is Elaine Hale. We need to talk. Ava's chest tightened. She glanced at her mother, then carefully stood and stepped into the hallway, moving far enough away that her voice would not carry. She leaned against the cool wall, closed her eyes once, and answered, I don't think that's a good idea. The response came almost instantly. You don't get to decide that. Ava exhaled slowly, the way she had been taught. In, hold, out. I'm at the hospital with my mother, she typed. She almost added please, then deleted it. There was a pause this time, long enough to make Ava hope, briefly, that the conversation might end there. Then her phone rang. Ava hesitated, then answered, Hello. Well, do heaven 23. Elaine's voice was smooth, controlled, stripped of the earlier rage. That somehow made it worse. You've caused quite a disruption, Elaine said. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? Ava closed her eyes. I didn't intend to. Intentions are irrelevant. Elaine cut in. What matters is perception. And the perception right now is that you manipulated my husband. I do that. I didn't, Ava said quietly. I asked him for help. That's all. With otherwise. You cornered him, Elaine snapped. Alone, late at night. You embarrassed yourself and me. Ava felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. You dragged me by my hair, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. I fell. I was hurt. Die. Elaine laughed softly. Don't exaggerate. Ava opened her eyes, staring down the empty hallway. I'm not. There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. Listen carefully, Elaine said. You will take the money. You will disappear quietly. And this ends. End quote. Ava swallowed. I'm not disappearing. It's ignore. You don't have a choice. I do, Ava replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. And I'm not asking for anything more than what was agreed. Well, for Mizet. Elaine's tone sharpened. You think Richard is choosing you? He's choosing order. Once things settle, you'll be forgotten. Maybe, Ava said. But not tonight. Was not Joe? Elaine hung up without another word. Ava lowered the phone, her hands shaking. For a moment, she felt the familiar pull to shrink, to retreat, to make herself smaller so the world would stop pushing back. Then she thought of the monitor beside her mother's bed, the steady proof of life. She straightened her shoulders and walked back into the room. Morning came slowly. Sunlight crept across the floor, touching the edge of the bed, the pale blanket, her mother's hand. Ava was awake when it happened, sitting upright, watching the machines. When her mother's eyes opened fully for the first time, Ava, she said, clearer now. Why does it hurt to breathe? Ava moved instantly to her side. Because your lungs are healing, she said gently. It's uncomfortable, but it means you're still here. Arkin, Her mother frowned. Did I scare you? Ava smiled. Tears threatening. Yes, very much. Her mother squeezed her fingers weakly. I'm sorry. With Macad other desire. Don't be. Ava whispered. Just stay. Everyone. A knock sounded at the door, followed by Dr. Lawson's familiar face. Good morning, he said. How are we feeling? Tired. Ava's mother replied. Hungry. Is not 2,000. The doctor smiled. That's an excellent sign. Joe. He explained the next steps: oxygen therapy, medication, weeks of rest, lifestyle changes that could no longer be ignored. Ava listened carefully, asking questions, committing everything to memory. When the doctor left, her mother turned her head slightly. You look hurt, she said, noticing the bandage. Ava hesitated. I fell. Her mother studied her face with the quiet perception that had always unsettled Ava. Did someone push you? Ava didn't answer right away. It doesn't matter, she said finally. Her mother sighed softly. It always matters. Oh, desires. Later that morning, Richard arrived again, carrying a paper bag and a quiet seriousness. He greeted Ava with a nod, then turned to her mother. How are you feeling? He asked. Her mother looked at him curiously. Like I lost a fight, she said. But I'm still standing. Idea. He smiled faintly. That counts. Is not common. When Ava stepped out into the hallway with him a few minutes later, he spoke first. Elaine called me last night. E1. Ava stiffened. She called me too. Everyone, I know, he said. She told me. Would it prove? Ava stopped walking. She what? She wasn't hiding it, Richard said calmly. She believes confrontation is honesty. V's gone. And what do you believe? Ava asked. Richard met her gaze. I believe intimidation is not conversation. Relief and fear tangled inside Ava's chest. This is escalating. 2. Yes, he agreed. And that's precisely why we need to be careful. Is 1. Careful usually means quiet, Ava said. And quiet usually means someone like me loses. Oh, Richard didn't argue. Not this time. Well, guys, he paused, then added, I've instructed my attorney to document everything. Messages, injuries, witness accounts. With Cap to do that. Ava stared at him. Why? Because if we proceed, he said, we do it with the truth on record. 3. She exhaled slowly. I never wanted a war. Was working too. Neither did I, he said. But ignoring injustice doesn't prevent conflict. It just delays it. Ava leaned against the wall, fatigue washing over her. I'm tired. I know, he replied. That's why you won't do this alone. Well, she looked at him, searching for certainty. And if this costs you your marriage? Richard didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. Some costs only feel unbearable because we avoided them for too long. Oh, they stood there in silence, the hospital moving around them, life continuing with or without their consent. Inside the room, Ava's mother slept peacefully again, unaware of the lines being drawn beyond her door. Ava looked back at her, then at Richard. Whatever happens, she said, I'm not backing down. It is Deverett, he nodded. Neither am I. Doesn't. For the first time since she had spoken the words that changed everything, Ava understood that survival was no longer her only goal. Now, she wanted justice too. The tension followed Ava out of the hospital like a second shadow. By mid-morning, her mother had been transferred to a quieter recovery wing, stable enough to rest without constant interruption. Ava stood at the bedside a long time before leaving, memorizing the shape of her mother's face as she slept, the slight furrow between her brows that had been there for as long as Ava could remember. I'll be back this afternoon, Ava whispered. I promise. A-team. Her mother didn't wake, but Ava imagined she heard her anyway. She always did. Outside, the air was crisp and bright, the city moving with its usual indifference. Richard's car waited at the curb. Ava hesitated before getting in. the instinct to refuse help tugging at her again. "You don't have to," she began. "I know," Richard said, holding the door open. "But today, let me—" She slid into the passenger seat, careful of her shoulder. As the car pulled away, the hospital disappeared behind them, but the weight of it stayed with her. They drove in silence for several minutes. "I reviewed the preliminary findings this morning," Richard said eventually. "About the laundry facility." "It is well." Ava turned toward him. "Already?" "I asked for urgency," he replied. "They didn't disappoint." Her chest tightened. "And there were violations," he said evenly. "Long-term exposure risks that were documented but never corrected. Your mother wasn't the only one affected." To give the detective ire, Ava looked down at her hands. "They knew." With replan. "Yes." "ID, and they did nothing." "Yes." End quote. The word landed heavily. Ava closed her eyes briefly. She kept saying she couldn't quit. That if she did, someone else would just take her place. Rated R. "That's usually how systems survive," Richard said. "By convincing people they're replaceable." Injure. The car stopped at a red light. Ava watched a woman cross the street pushing a stroller. Her face tired but determined. Ordinary life. Moving on. "What happens now?" Ava asked. Richard glanced at her. "That depends on you." "Everyone." She frowned. "On me? This could become formal," he said. "Investigations, claims, accountability. Or it could stay quiet. Medical assistance. Job transition. No public attention." With these, Ava understood immediately. Silence for safety. Noise for justice. "And what do you want?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "I want the truth acknowledged," he said finally. "But it's not my body that paid the price." Was lived. Ava swallowed. "If this becomes public, my mother will be protected," he said. "I won't allow retaliation." 18. "You can't guarantee that," Ava replied. "Not for people like us." "Day expires of the money," Richard nodded. "No, I can't. That's why this has to be your choice." Intended. They arrived at her apartment building shortly after. Ava paused with her hand on the door handle. "I need to change," she said. "And think. I'll be at the office," Richard replied. "Call me when you're ready." "Is come." She nodded and stepped out of the car. Inside the apartment, the quiet felt heavy. Ava changed her clothes slowly, wincing as she moved her shoulder. She stood in front of the small bathroom mirror and studied her reflection. The bruise was still visible beneath the bandage. Her eyes looked older than they had a week ago. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Elaine again. I hear you're planning something foolish." Ava stared at the message, her jaw tightening. "This doesn't concern you." Ava typed back before she could stop herself. The response was immediate. "Everything that concerns Richard concerns me." Ava's fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed, deliberately, "Then you should be concerned with the truth." There was a long pause. Longer than usual. When the reply came, it was shorter. "You won't win this." Ava set the phone down, her hands shaking not with fear this time, but anger. She sat at the small kitchen table and opened her laptop, pulling up old emails, saved pay stubs, documents her mother had kept just in case. She didn't know what she was looking for at first, only that she needed to understand the shape of what had hurt them. Hours passed. By the time she returned to the hospital that afternoon, Ava felt different. Tired. Yes, but steadier. Her mother was awake, sipping water. Her voice stronger now. "You look serious," her mother said. "I am," Ava replied, taking her hand. "We need to talk. It's, about the job, about the chemicals, about the years her mother had worked through coughing fits and exhaustion because there was no other option." Her mother listened quietly, eyes closing at times, then opening again. "They'll make trouble for you," her mother said softly when Ava finished. "They already have," Ava replied. "This just gives it a name." Her mother sighed. "I didn't raise you to be quiet." "Whoa," Ava smiled faintly. I know. Everyone. Richard arrived later that evening. Ava met him in the hallway. I've made a decision, she said. He studied her face. And? I want it documented. Ava said. All of it. What happened to my mother? What happened to me? The messages. The injury. I tend. Richard nodded slowly. That will escalate things. Oh, I know, Ava replied. But silence already cost us years. And, he held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Then we proceed carefully. And thoroughly. Yes, Elaine won't stop, Ava said. No, Richard agreed. She won't. I can see will.com. And if this destroys your marriage? He exhaled. Then it tells me something was already broken. Du prize. Ava absorbed that. Then nodded. All right. Matigno. They walked back into the room together. Ava's mother looked at them, understanding more than either of them said. Outside, night fell over the city. Quiet and indifferent.